number one piece of advice is try again. I say that to myself all the time. Try again. Life is not a straight line. Clearly, I didn't get a straight line to the C-suite, right? I jigged and jagged and went here and did that and raised my hand and got rebuffed, but never gave up. Always had that goal in mind.
Welcome to the Break Free Podcast. I am your host, David Mansella. This podcast is dedicated to interviewing the lives of fabulous people, leaders in our society that are making this world a better place and living life in their own terms, a life of fulfillment. And today we have with us Laurie Stewart. Laurie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Laurie, for the audience, can you tell me your full name, where do you live, and what do you do for a living?
I would be happy to. My name is Laurie Stewart. Actually, my name's Laura Lee Stewart, but everybody calls me by that more common casual name, Laurie. I live in Seattle, in the great state of Washington. You know, we call that the other Washington, the good Washington. And I am the president and CEO of a Sound Community Bank, which is a bank serving both urban and rural communities in Western Washington. We're a quintessential community bank that does business lending, residential lending, deposit gathering, all the things you think of that your community bank would do. So
let's talk a little bit about the banking system. What's the difference between a community bank and a large scale commercial bank?
I think that there are a couple of significant distinctions. In community banks, small business lending is in many ways the bread and butter of the banks in communities, both rural and urban. And community banks tend to do those smaller loans that really create jobs and support the community. Over the years, community banks have also been very strong in residential lending. And that's not to say the big banks aren't, they're fabulous at that. But I'm talking about the less traditional kinds of loans that are not supported in the secondary market. So for instance, a home in the middle of 50 acres of land would be a loan that probably the secondary market wouldn't support and would be unique to community banks filling that need. For instance, at our bank, we make loans on floating homes. Think Sleepless in Seattle, right?
Wow.
But the large banks that do business in our market see that as such a tiny market. You know, there are not that many of them, that is just not an area where they can support the business to do it, where we can.
That's beautiful. And you know that the vast majority of businesses in the free world are small businesses, small and medium businesses.
Right.
So if it wasn't for community banks, we wouldn't have the economy that we have right now. Isn't that incredible?
That it is incredible. And I think it really speaks to that PPP program a couple years back. Community banks made the vast majority of those loans to small businesses that helped them survive the COVID downturn. And we made more loans in the PPP time than we had made in 3 years before that. The smallest one was $900. Can you imagine? That saved a small business person. The biggest one was $5 million. So they were various sizes. But again, that's the community bank model.
That's beautiful. And thank you for your service. And that's why I really wanted to interview you, because I knew you were actually changing this world for a better place. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against the big institutions, big banking and all that. But if you look at the major corporations, once you reach a certain size, the corporations become so strong that they become international, and then the market starts to suffer by imposing monopolies. That's why we have anti-monopoly laws, to make sure that doesn't happen, right? For me, there is nothing more scary than a corporation that is more influencing and more powerful than a government, right? because a dictatorship is not the free world anymore.
So we think of ourselves as a values-based company. We're publicly traded. We're a micro cap. We're just a small bank. You know, we have market cap of about 100 million. But we think values first, right? So if we live by our corporate values, we can give a good return to shareholders, and we can support our communities. We can give back to those communities where we do business, and we can be a great place to work. But we really believe that the values proposition will drive profitability, will drive community commitment. And so we have to put it first.
Yeah, you know, values are so important. In my main business, I almost went bankrupt a couple of times because I treated my values like a poster on a wall that looked pretty, but nobody knew about. I didn't even know about, and I was the leader of the company. So when I actually realized that culture was everything, and culture is based on values, then I implemented through values that people can live by. And you know, for me, values, it's important to say this, but values for me is the rules in which people can filter decisions when the boss is not watching. Right?
Well, yeah.
And so if you do that, then you have more freedom to your employees. They feel that they are actually adding more through their contribution, and they know that they're making probably the right decision based on those filters. Right? So for example, for us, our values are only three: gratitude, growth, and giving back. So if everybody makes a decision, they know that they have to think about, am I going to be grateful to have this decision done? Is it going to help me grow my business and my career? And lastly, am I going to be abundant enough that I can give back? So if it passes those three, even if the decision doesn't turn out to be as good, it's okay, because then we can learn from it.
Exactly. And I often say that we learn more from the mistakes we made than we do from our successes, right? It's that try and not be successful sometimes that allows us to try again and be successful. There's a little bit of luck in everything, and sometimes we're lucky, but often if we're challenged, it's identifying what was the challenge, what made it hard or unsuccessful, what got in the way of the client experience, and then learn from that and build. But I like that comment about giving back. I'd like to talk about that just a little bit more. One of our core values is that we give back to the communities where we do business. And our employees are graded on their volunteerism. We ask everyone to volunteer. We don't say where you volunteer, or what the cause or event is. Of course, as a bank, we have a requirement to volunteer for things like the Community Reinvestment Act. But we ask our employees to pick and then to share with us the time they're giving and some of the things that they're doing. But we also, because we're successful, we can give money back too, right? So we can volunteer, we can give people time off to do volunteer work, and then we can put money back in our communities. And we have consistently been named a top philanthropist for many years in our market. And that's probably one of the things we're most proud of. We're proud of being a high-performing bank. We're proud of being a 5-star bank. We're really proud to be known as a top philanthropist.
Isn't it beautiful? Like, you can make money while making an impact still and giving back.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about, I go back to the free world. That's what I love about our societies and capitalism. I call it benevolent capitalism, where you can actually decide what you want to do with your life. And once you become successful, it's in your heart to give back. It's in human nature to be kind to other people. The problem is when you impose these things to people and you try to rationalize based on large governments, everything starts to fall apart, right? So Laurie, tell me, how did you get here? Let's jump in a time machine and go back when you were 18 years old. What was in your mind, and what decisions did you make right after high school?
Well, I'm going to go back just even a tiny bit more than that.
Okay.
So I am a small town girl. I grew up in a community. There were 86 kids in my high school graduating class. So we're talking small town USA. In a rural part of the state of Washington, some folks think the state is kind of shaped like your fist with the thumb hanging out. That is the most westerly part of the contiguous United States. That's where I was raised, in a little town called Sequim.
So you're almost Canadian.
And I'm a child of a self-employed dad, and a mom, mostly a stay-at-home mom, though she helped in the business, of course. My dad had a 6th grade education. My mom had an 8th grade education.
Wow.
So I was the first kid to graduate from high school in my family on both sides, let alone go to college. But I went to work in a bank in my freshman year of college, and it was a great job. It was sure better than working in a fast food restaurant, which I'd done in high school. I also worked in my dad's business, kept his books, paid his bills. I started doing that when I was about 12. So I had some knowledge of numbers and that kind of thing. But I'd always been kind of a geek in high school. I didn't study bookkeeping. I only took typing because my mother made me. She said, someday you'll want to be able to type. So I was more into history and drama and that kind of thing. But I liked that bank job. And I married a sailor and ended up in a Navy town on Whidbey Island. And when I looked around for jobs, I could work in the Navy commissary store, or I could be a cocktail waitress, but there were several banks in town, and so I went right for the banking. I probably worked in banks for about 6 or 7 years before it occurred to me that could be a career. I was always going to school. That was always going to be something else that I was going to do. And at about the 6 to 7 year mark, I said, just a second. This could be a great career, but there still weren't many women then. Remember, I'm fall in that category of mature. So I was often in my career the first woman bank officer, the first woman vice president, the first woman senior vice president. So I was in that first round of kind of hitting up against the glass ceiling. But it was also a good spot to be, because when folks looked around and said, what woman might be interested in career making, I was there and I wasn't afraid to raise my hand. So I worked for men, and I was branch manager, and I said to him, I said, Wayne, I really want to be an operations officer in the bank. And he looked at me and he said, well, you better be patient, because our only female operations officer is going to work. She's going to be the only one, and you will have to wait till she retires or dies. It was really good I didn't wait, because she worked into her 80s, if you can imagine. She worked into her 80s, so fabulous woman. She only passed away just a few years ago. So if I'd stayed around there and waited, I'd probably still be there. But instead, I said, well, then I better make an opportunity. And I took a job in doing audits for community banks. And so that was really educational and kind of helped launch me, give me the skills for that next opportunity.
It's beautiful when I interview people like you, where you are actually breaking the ground and opening up the field for other women like you that want to become successful in their careers. And by the ages, it was something that couldn't happen, and we needed people like Laurie to come in and put your soldier, your army gear on and say, you know what, I'm going to break this wall. I'm going to make sure people can see that it's possible, because it doesn't matter what gender you are. What matters is your heart and your willingness to do an excellent job and keep prospering, right?
Well, thank you for that. I really believe, and pardon the phrasing here, but I really believe there's a special place in hell for women that don't reach their hand down to help other women and lift them up. That is an obligation of those that got to go first. And I have, over my career, known a few women who really didn't want that to happen. They wanted to arrive enjoyed that position of being one of the few women in the room. And I think we can all celebrate our successes, but I am totally committed at this point in my life to mentoring women and faces of color and all the people that are underrepresented in an industry that has been predominantly white men for very many years. So I'm totally committed to that.
That's beautiful. And, it's a humankind thing, it's a humankind issue where we need to actually evolve and realize that we are all made on their God's image and we're all the same. Everybody bleeds red.
Yes.
So we're all the same inside, right?
Yes.
Think about it. So, but I think we're moving fast towards those goals. And like the more people I interview, successful people, the more I realize that, it's the opportunities now are there, thanks to people like you that made them happen. When you say it is possible and I will make it happen, it's such a beautiful thing to have. For me, being an immigrant wasn't easy at the beginning, but I was blessed because I was in computer science. So in technology, it was always easier to break into a different society. And I will always be thankful for the Canadian system because they always opened up their doors with love and gave me the opportunity. Nobody gave me anything for free. I had to fight for it. But I overcame the language barrier. I overcame the skin barrier. I overcame all those obstacles that people, when they come to a different country, realize that they might not be able to do it. But it takes determination. It takes prayers. It takes faith. And then the doors will be open. It's beautiful. Right?
I think you're so well spoken on that topic. I was riding in an Uber, visiting with the driver a few months back, and I happened to ask him how he happened to be driving Uber, and he was an immigrant from an African country. And I said, my family are immigrants. And he looked at me and he said, well, that's not possible. And I said, well, this country is built on immigrants, and it just happens to be that my grandparents on both sides from Norway and from Germany. But again, because they're European, that doesn't look like an immigrant to others, right? And so I think it's important for us to tell those stories too, that this country is built on that dream of being successful in the great American dream. And many of us, not that far back. I mean, my great grandmother came on a train across the country, not speaking one word of English.
Right.
With my grandmother in tow, as a toddler. So.
And and that's the strength of North America, I believe. When you have a community that has multiculturalism, and they keep and preserve the laws, though, right? Like, so this is the one thing that I always tell people, new immigrants: you're coming to Canada, forget where you come from in terms of rules and regulations, and abide by the laws of the country that are giving you the privilege of being part of their society, right? Stay and abide by the free world laws that you have in the country they are moving to. Otherwise, go back to your hometown, wherever you were, right? You have to abide by those laws. And if you do that, then you create community, and then you bring the best of you.
Right.
And the best of you helps build this country. Canada is the same way. It's a melting pot of multiple countries. I remember when I was in corporate, we were 500 people in this business. And at lunch, you could see 27 countries represented in the cafeteria.
Wow.
But everybody working towards the same goal and abiding under the laws that are set in this country. That makes it free. Right?
Makes it free and creates opportunities.
Exactly. So, Laurie, for somebody that was, let's say, 25 years old and wanted to break free into their career of their dreams, what advice would you give them?
Ask that last question. I didn't quite catch it.
So what advice would you give somebody in their 20s that wants to create a beautiful career like you did?
Okay. Well, I've got all kinds of advice, but not because I think I'm smart, just because I want to share. I like to share. So my absolute number one piece of advice is try again. I say that to myself all the time. Try again. Life is not a straight line. Clearly, I didn't get a straight line to the C-suite, right? I jigged and jagged and went here and did that and raised my hand and got rebuffed, but never gave up. Always had that goal in mind that I wanted to lead a company and that I wanted to lead a bank. We have some podcasts on our bank website that are under She Runs the Bank, where I talk about some of these issues and what I'm hoping to accomplish. So try again. Then the other thing that has helped me tremendously, whenever I've been scared or didn't want to raise my hand or didn't want to take a chance, maybe a little frozen or too worried to take action, I always try and make a list of what's the worst that could happen. What's the very worst that could happen if you do this and fail? And you know what? Lots of times the very worst that can happen isn't such a big deal at all. It's that we've built up the fear in our head. I won't get picked. Well, I don't think anybody ever died from not getting selected. I don't think anybody ever bled any of that red blood you're talking about just because they didn't get selected. So I remember a few years back, I was nominated for the chair of the American Bankers Association. There'd only been 2 other women in 140 years. I was excited to be considered, and I was not selected. And so the next year, there was some talk about, put your name in again. And I said, no, I've been there, done that. And then as that second year went on, I thought, just a second, Laurie, you're not taking your own advice. What's the worst that could happen? You won't get picked again. Well, been there, done that, didn't die, right? So I did agree then after a 1-year gap to put my name in, and guess what? I was selected. So again, make that list of what's the worst that can happen. And then thirdly, we've already talked about it, is learn from the things that didn't work. Celebrate your success, absolutely celebrate, but spend more time on saying, okay, that didn't work out so well. What could I have done different? What could we have done different? How could I have engaged other team members in the process, and learn from that experience together?
Such beautiful and wise wisdom. The worst, what you said was the worst thing that could happen. That's a beautiful way to mitigate fear and manage risk. My dad taught me that lesson when I was in high school. He always told me, when you're trying to achieve something, just see what could happen if it didn't work out. And if you can live with that, go all in, because then your base is set. Go all in. But people don't have, this is so simple, but nobody does it. Very few people knows this truth. And that's why I make this podcast, because how many times in my life, moving to Canada.
Yeah.
So I decided to move to Canada with my wife. I had a 1-year-old baby. And my dad told me, okay, let's sit down. What's the worst thing that could happen? That you don't like it, or it's too cold, or they reject you? Then you take a flight back and go back home, and you haven't lost anything. Yeah, you lose some money, but then you get a great experience under your belt. So that's why I did. And that's one of the most risky things I've done in my life, right? I already had a computer science degree from back home. I could have just made a career back home. So this is so important, and it's true, Laurie. Also, the fact that you mentioned learn from your mistakes. I truly believe that every hardship in life, every problem, and every failure is a way of God giving you another stepping stone to go to your next success. The only way to have a breakthrough is to fail through it until you figure out what's the right thing to do. For example, when you asked to have this higher position and your boss told you, you have to wait until this lady retires, that was a failure. But you took it in a way that you could pivot around, never quit, and went another way to get where you wanted to be. Right? Or you could have said, okay, I'll wait here. And you've been stuck as a branch manager for a long time, right?
A long time. I went to that branch manager's retirement. I mean, he retired 10, 12 years ago, and I hadn't seen him for years, but I knew what bank he worked for, to the north of here, a couple hours drive. And I heard about his retirement party. And so I drove to his retirement party, and I walked in, and he did not recognize me at first, but then he looked at me and he remembered me when I worked for him all those years ago. And I said to him, I said, Wayne, I'm the CEO of a bank because of you. And he said, I didn't even promote you. How could you be a CEO? I said, because of what you told me. You told me that I couldn't, that the answer would be no, really. So that challenged me to find another way to get there. So
yeah, beautiful. What has been the biggest problem in your business life, and how do you overcome it?
I think our biggest challenges are always around people. And in many ways, we are our own biggest problem, right? Gets back to learning from our mistakes, learning from our experiences, and doing better the next time around. So while I can't think of one, I can think of challenging things. I can think working on difficult data processing conversions that didn't work out quite right. I can think of managing through the Great Recession. I think the challenges are always, how do we build a successful team that wins for everybody? I want everybody to win. I want shareholders to win. I want employees to win. I want clients to win. And how to learn that I believe the only way to succeed at that is to be a servant leader. Yes, I'm the CEO. Yes, the buck stops at my desk. Yes, I'm going to put on my big girl underwear and take the lumps. But in the final analysis, the success of my people is for me to help them, to me to be a servant to them, to make them successful. And sometimes that's hard to remember, right? Because we put on our CEO hat and we say, well, I've considered everything and this is what we're going to do. And if that is too authoritarian or doesn't get to that goal of raising up other people, then it's often the wrong decision. And I have to, look at myself in the mirror and say that you're not keeping up with your core values. So that's what I think is hard.
You just revealed the secret of amazing leadership. Servant leadership is the way to the top. And also recognizing that if you have people that work for you, they not only work for you, they work with you. And if you hire them, it's because they must be doing a better job at what they're doing that you could do. So that you have to take into consideration their input before you make a big decision. This just happened to me yesterday. We had a big decision to make involving thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And I grabbed the 5 top people that were involved with this project. And then I asked them one by one, what do they think we should do? And then based on their advice, we took the right decision. You see? But it's because I like you, I have that servant leadership attitude where I don't consider myself the best. For the contrary, I'm just here to facilitate my teams so that they can make the right decisions and we can move forward, right?
Yeah, I like that, especially facilitating the team. That's great phrasing.
Right. So for the Great Recession on 2008, how did you navigate that? Was that a scary time for you?
Yeah, it was definitely, it was hard times for all banks. And in our state, we had many bank failures. So earnings were difficult. Providing enough for loan loss reserves was our biggest challenge. And then helping clients have confidence and not panic and not put their savings in their mattress as opposed to leaving it in the bank in a safe and sound manner. But you can understand why they were scared, because they saw banks failing all around. So It was a challenge, but again, I think we stayed true to our core values and our purpose. We never stopped lending. A lot of banks said, no, the way to get through this is to stop making loans. We were very cautious. We probably tightened our underwriting. You know, we were maybe more cautious and took less risk than we would in a different environment. We put more money away in the loan loss reserve, but we never stopped lending during the entire cycle. And so as things improved, other financial institutions that had stopped lending had lost some of their clients, especially their smaller business clients, to us, because we hung in there during the tough times. And you know, our stock price went very, very low, but we continued to say as a team that, you know, we don't run the market, we run the bank. And if the bank is fundamentally strong, then this cycle will change. And it has. So
it's beautiful. And you know, you apply that rule that says when everybody is bold, you have to be conservative. And when everybody is conservative, you have to be bold. And
yes,
that's how you gain market share. In the crisis, moments of crisis, when companies grow, companies that know what they're doing.
Well, and that's, you know, that's precisely right. When PPP came along, some of the folks on the team said, gee, you know, we shouldn't take clients that aren't our clients. We should only, you know, and we shouldn't do so much. And I said, no, we should run into this fire. I know you can do it. This is our opportunity to help businesses where their bank might not be able to. And, you know, I made calls to clients in that first round of PPP when we ran out of money and we couldn't do anymore. That was super hard to call clients and say, I'm sorry, you know, you were in the queue, but the money ran out. But then we got wave 2 and we could call those same clients and say, we're putting you through now. And awesome. Those calls were even more fun to say, hey, I got your PPP money. It'll be in your account tomorrow. I was talking to a dentist, broke into tears. I mean, it was life-changing for many of those clients. And as a result, you know, the reputation and the community support we get and some additional businesses, right, doing business with us has been a blessing.
That's beautiful. And that's how you get to be a local bank with $100 million in market cap. Congratulations. I don't want to overuse your time. You're so kind for being with us and sharing this beautiful wisdom that you have developed throughout your years. So I'm going to close the podcast with one last question. If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
What would I write on the billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth? I would write, do well so you can do good.
Oh, that's good. That's beautiful. Do well so you can do good. It's right. It's right. You have to do well before you can actually bless other people. It's like, you know, when you're on the airplane, first you put the mask on and then you put it to somebody else that needs it. But if you don't have the mask, how can you help somebody else?
Somebody else.
Right? That's incredible. Laurie, if people wanted to get in touch with you and ask you more questions about leadership and becoming the CEO of an important organization, can they reach you on LinkedIn? Are you on LinkedIn? Where can they go?
I'm on LinkedIn, but that I find that LinkedIn has become very commercial and people are always selling things. So I'm not as diligent. I have absolutely no problem sharing my email address with you. It is Laurie, Laurie .Stewart, STEWART @sound, SOUND, C as in Charlie, B as in boy.com. Laurie.Stewart @soundcb.com.
Fantastic. Laurie, thank you so much. God bless you. And I hope your bank keeps growing and keeps adding massive value to your community.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Thanks so much for having me. It was a great time. Bye-bye.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.